you mentioned this in passing. I want to emphasize this a bit more. I personally have seen that in a number of people, this is certainly not everyone's issue, but in a certain kind of person, it may be very well the case that their nutrition and lifestyle habits could be dialed in quite well, and they still just suffer from serious health issues because their major issue is a toxic relationship with an energy vampire. And this can be, really the major issue for a lot of people's health struggles or chronic fatigue. Can you talk a bit about, I guess, first of all, I'm assuming you agree with me, but do you agree with what I said just now?
Absolutely. That was almost the whole reason that I wrote the book. As a physician,
okay,
I thought people need to know this, because this is the reason why women are getting breast cancer, why they have chronic fatigue, why we have all these mystery illnesses. They literally are being drained dry, and no matter what they do, and they're the ones seeing the functional medicine docs. They're the ones doing acupuncture, getting massage. They're doing everything to get better. And until this energy imbalance is addressed, they're not going to get better.
Yeah. And can you talk, I think, from sort of a physiological and reductionist biochemical perspective? I know this is certainly not, the only paradigm that you want to talk about this from, but just for a moment, can you talk a bit about maybe some of the mechanisms by which being in a toxic relationship with an energy vampire could manifest as health problems and fatigue?
Yeah. First of all, there's this thing called gaslighting. So let's just talk about what that is. It comes from a movie, Gaslight, where this guy was trying to, I think, kill his wife. And what he would do is he would turn down the gas lights and tell her, and she'd say, "Who turned down the lights?" And he'd go, "What are you talking about?" and turn them back up. So that's what gaslighting means. And it took me a while to, people would talk about gaslighting. What is it? It comes from that movie. But what it really amounts to is this toxic person has malignant intuition. They know what your most heartfelt dreams and desires are, and they give you just enough to keep you hooked so that you will give them your love, your attention, your money, your sex, all of that. And you won't get anything in return except a crumb now and again. What that leads to is chronically high cortisol levels. Then with chronically high cortisol levels, if you've seen anybody on prednisone or steroids, anyone who has cancer who's given steroids, you know that they'll often gain 20 pounds. They will have depressed immunity so that they are then susceptible to every germ that's going around. Their skin gets thinner, their hair can fall out, the thyroid can sort of fall out. And you keep giving and not having this replenished, because that's, life force, which modern medicine doesn't really talk about, but the life force can be interpreted as your adrenal health, your ability to produce cortisol and epinephrine. Now, if you're producing too much cortisol and epinephrine, the fight or flight hormones, you need additional B vitamins and magnesium, just for starters, just to keep those hormones being produced. And over time, you will deplete your body's levels of those nutrients so that you're running on empty. And then you keep trying to give this person what they want. It's like you're on continual prednisone and steroids. You have then incredible sugar cravings. You can't seem to stop eating. You can't sleep. Over time, you get what's called executive function disorder. And literally, this has been studied, where people who are, now remember, they tend to target, and I want to get into this concept of super traits. It's a very specific type of person. And Sandra Brown has studied this at Purdue to show that this is a real thing. There is a type of person who doesn't see it. We're born with rose-colored glasses, and they keep manipulating you. You keep giving until you've almost lost your ability to function. You're depressed, you're overweight, the immune system is shot, and you're the one showing up at the health fair. You're the one going for, you're doing everything in your power to regain your health, and you don't get it, that you're bailing a boat that has a chronic leak in it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just not going to get any stronger because nobody's coming to relieve you until you finally patch the leak. And that is, name the toxic relationship and get out of it. But here's the problem. These individuals are very addictive. They're addictive, and they don't go away. I mean, it's interesting that some of the energy vampires in my life, 20 years later, they're still in touch. It's so odd. And then you think, oh my God, they really did like me. No, they didn't. You're just the source of narcissistic supply because you have so much light and so much to give to others. But the bottom line is, they drain your vital life energy. They drain your vital financial fluids very often. So they're taking your money. And, but you know, you're depleted of all of your nutrients, and your nutrient burn rate goes way, way, way up.
We've talked about all this sort of different aspects and nuances of energy vampires. What can somebody do on a practical level to, you know, once they've sort of recognized they're in that situation, what can they do on a practical level to either prevent being in that situation in the first place and escape maybe a lifelong pattern, or get out of the situation that they're currently in?
Okay. Knowledge is power. So the first thing you do is you learn about it. You learn the dynamics. And this is what my book, Dodging Energy Vampires, has done. People will say, oh my God, you know, I learned so much from that. Now I know what I have to do. George Simon has a wonderful book called In Sheep's Clothing. And he used to, and he's a PhD psychologist, and he said he used to teach therapists 25 years ago. And the therapists, many of them would walk out of the room because they didn't want to believe that this was a real thing. Now he trains therapists who understand the dynamics. So the first thing is to realize what you're dealing with and understand that you will have enormous resistance for seeing the truth. But what's happening, especially in the new energy, I call this the new energy on Earth. We didn't blow ourselves up as a planet December 21st, 2012. So now the light is winning and it's flushing out the darkness. So what's happening is the dark is getting darker, but the light is getting lighter. So it's going to be harder and harder for people to stay in these relationships. Harder and harder as they're waking up. You could stay in these in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, when how it looking good as a family was such a huge thing that you didn't want to leave. But now we almost can't keep this up anymore. So the first thing is realize what you're dealing with. That's number one. Number two, get in some kind of support group. So there's a number of them. There's the Empath Survival Guide. Judith Orloff has a Facebook group online for people that's free. It's you know, how to determine what you do as an empath. Melanie Tonya Evans out of Australia has her NARP group, the Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Program. So she's got a big online presence, and she's got a you know, a YouTube channel, Thriver TV. So you can go there and learn about that. She's just coming out with a book. She's got an online program. And what's important is to realize that once you get out of the pattern, you notice it in yourself, you get out of the pattern, you can have a whole new life. You can get a whole new life partner. It's like you completely change your point of attraction. So there's nothing to be gained. And Dr. Simon said that what he found is that if he could just interrupt the pattern so that people would not stay in these marriages for 35, 40 years. Because what you'd often find is, you know, some woman, some man who's 70, 75, and they've donated their whole life to changing this character who's not going to change. So to me, and then the other thing that I have done in my own life is I just do a timeline. and I see, okay, this was a relationship with, let's say, a childhood friend that lasted 40 years, but now I'm no longer in touch with that person. This work colleague was 13 years. This business colleague, I saw it within 3 years. And now, I have my reality check people. So I see it coming down the road, and I don't even have to have the relationship. So you can judge, start to laugh about it. First of all, I believe that we are immortal and we're just learning this particular lesson here on earth. So it's never too late.
Mm-hmm.
But the first thing is you've got to believe it. And most people, when they're in it, that's how it works for the energy vampire. They get others to be their flying monkeys, and their strategy is splitting. They split their children from the other parent. They split their children from each other, divide and conquer.
Mm-hmm.
So they have all these tactics that work. And as long as you're doing their bidding, then nothing can change. The person has to be ready on a soul level to see the pattern. Oh, and then here's the biggest one. Okay, there's a song on the radio, Say Something, I'm Giving Up on You. I'm sure you have heard it. I couldn't listen to it for 2 years because it's like I would never give up on someone. And finally, you have to. You have to give up on the vampire. And George Simon talks about that. It's the only way they will ever change in the 1 in a million times they do. You have to finally give up on them. There's not one more thing you can say, you can do, not one more book you can give them, not one more workshop you can go to, not one more massage that you buy for them, not one thing. You give up on them.
I have one question on that. So you said there's nothing else, and maybe I'm misquoting you, but you said something like nothing else will cause them to change except that. And so are you talking about the energy vampire, that by someone giving up on them, they will change? Or are you talking about the victim changing?
Okay, no. In the very rare circumstances when they changed, okay, now this is a double-edged sword because the empath will do anything.
When the vampire will change.
When the vampire will change. So you're waiting your whole life for them to change, right? Mm-hmm. So that you can finally get something back. And so you keep thinking that you can heal them, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. The only time that they ever change, if they ever do, and they usually don't, is you must proceed as though they will never, ever change. It is the only way. It's the only way. And then in the 1 in a million times when they do change, it is because your withdrawal will finally wake them up to the fact, this is the one case where I've seen some change, they lose status, money, a marriage, looking good. That's the only thing that has any relevance for them. It's not love.
I think I get where you were going when you called it a double-edged sword. My hunch is that what you're saying is you have to then be wary from the empath's, the victim's perspective. You have to then be worried about maybe them playing a little psychological game or deluding themselves into sort of thinking, like, oh, now I can finally change this person by threatening them to leave.
That's it.
Or sort of halfway convincing myself that I'm going to leave, but secretly I'm wishing that it will cause them to change and then I can stay with them.
That's right. That's it.
Yeah.
The one time when I saw change in a man was when his wife already had an apartment. She was ready to leave. She was ready to walk away. This is the other thing people do, is they stay embroiled in these toxic situations because of money and possessions. It is better to walk away and have your life than to hang around waiting for an oriental rug.
Mm.
Yeah.
I have one last question to you. This is a very big picture question. It almost gets into like a sort of meta spiritual sort of question, but basically, if you look at sort of the big picture of this you could call it this cosmic game of human life on Earth.
Yeah.
It is interesting that these personality dynamics even exist, that
Yes.
it's possible to be in a relationship with somebody where you are either a victim or you're a vampire, or, you know, I mean, there's an innumerable different variations of kinds of relationships, some toxic, some beautiful. But in one sense, when you consider the big picture, you know, not the small scale of somebody suffering in the context of a toxic relationship, but maybe the big picture of certain people suffering in a toxic relationship, then let's say encountering the knowledge that you're sharing, and then let's say having a set of realizations that lead to them getting rid of that toxic relationship, profoundly changing the course of their life, you could almost see that narcissist and that energy vampire as almost in the grand scheme of the cosmic game, almost a catalyst for those people reclaiming their power and transforming their life. And I'm certainly not trying to justify those people or say that they're really do-gooders or anything like that, but I'm saying in a weird sort of way on the grand picture of the cosmic game, they may be serving some kind of greater role in helping people rise up to some new level of power in their lives.
I completely agree, which is why the very first entry into my acknowledgments in the book was my gratitude to every single energy vampire in my life, because without them, I would never be who I am today. Mm. It's like they are the grain of sand in the oyster, and you keep working with it until you got a pearl. And I absolutely believe with you that sometime, you know, before birth, when you decided who your parents were going to be and what the point of attraction was going to be, the energy vampire said, okay, I'm going to wear the black hat. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to perform for you the greatest spiritual service I ever could. I completely agree with you. Our job is to stop doing tick checks on ourselves. Mm-hmm. Our job is to trust our gut and not talk ourselves out of our own goodness. And so here's what you need. You need to have a reality check group of friends. Now, here's what you'll find. Most of the time, your friends will not like this person, whether it's a man or a woman. You know, later they'll tell you, oh God, I knew that was bad from the beginning. So you need to have, here's what I have now. Okay. I have a woman, Diane, who arranged this, and we've worked together for about, 37 years. She was my first nurse, and she has a radar that is impeccable. Impeccable. She's never been wrong. But I have said to her, now look, if I'm about to do it again in business, in a personal relationship, you have to tell me. I said, you can't hide behind, I knew it, and tell me 3 years later. You got to tell me right away, because now I trust you. I mean, because I've had enough experience with patients who have reported me and lawsuits and all of that, I'm now way upstream on this. So, but I have a couple people when I say to them, listen, because remember, super trait people, that's a fixed personality. You see the best in other people. You honest to God, I think in 200 years, in 200 lifetimes, you're still going to think, if I could just get to the heart of that person, if I could just touch their soul, they would wake up and change. I mean, we become rescue addicts, for heaven's sakes. Mm. So you have to have people who are reality checks for you. So my friend, who whose ex-husband called just before his wedding, she'll call me and she'll say, look, here's what I'm doing with this other guy I'm dating. What do you think? She'll call me the minute you start to feel like maybe this is eerily familiar. Now, oftentimes, we will have had a parent who was one of these. Mm-hmm. So it feels normal to us. Mm-hmm. Because as a little kid, age 2, age 3, you think it's your job to heal the parent. Mm-hmm. So it's it's a very old pattern. It's very ingrained. And it's not about not loving the parent. It's about loving yourself. That it ultimately becomes about, would I ever treat someone the way I'm being treated? And the answer is no. You
Yeah.
wouldn't. You couldn't.
So basically, we all need a Diane in our lives.
Yeah, or just a good friend who can see it. Because
Yeah.
you're going to have friends, you know, like here's the difference. An energy vampire, let's say it's a man, comes up to me at a bar, not anymore, but in the past, and says, you know, well, my ex-wife won't let me see the kids, and she's such a bitch, and you know, and I was all about, oh, well, I'm sure that I can help you heal your heart and all of that. A normal person without super traits will say, what a loser. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey there, this is Ari again. One more quick thing before you go. Just make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Energy Blueprint, and also make sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform, whether that's iTunes or Stitcher or anything else. I hope you guys enjoyed this interview, and I will see you again next week.